Hello everyone, this is Darion of GNB Productions, and today, in this final installment of Hedgehog Month, I'd like to discuss something that's been on my mind for a few years now. For those who may or may not know, in my Sonic Movie 2 review, I had this to say.
They even gave me a bit of solo Tails and Knuckles action. These two characters I've always had a big issue with when it comes to Team Sonic, but that will be a discussion for a later video.
And today is that day. Not only will we be talking about my problem with Team Sonic, but also Sonic teams as a whole. Now, when I first thought of making this video, it was originally just going to focus on Team Sonic and the glaring issue that I feel surrounds that particular trio, which you will find out about in a bit. But I then found myself in a position where the video wouldn't exactly be to my liking, per se. Like, yeah, I'd get my thoughts out there and that'd just kind of be the end of it. But then, I thought about something else. There's also a pretty big problem I have with the various Sonic teams in this franchise as well. So I've made the decision to make a slightly longer video that focuses on my problems on each of these respective topics. The first half will of course be me discussing my issue with Team Sonic. And in the latter half, we'll bridge out and go over my problems with how this franchise does teams. And how that bled into how the fandom and the franchise as a whole chooses to utilize these characters. So, with all that said, let's get into it, shall we? So, what exactly is the big problem with Team Sonic that I've casually avoided mentioning? Well, I'm going to keep avoiding it because I have an important question to ask. What makes a good trio? There are a large myriad of trios in fiction, and any good trio has one thing in common. All members have a well-thought-out connection and dynamic with one another. For example, Ben and Gwen Tennyson and Kevin Levin. Ben and Gwen had an entire series to showcase their sibling-like dynamic with one another. Ben and Kevin showed pretty decent growth as they over time became friendlier with one another. And Gwen and Kevin of course have their thing going on, which is self-explanatory. Another example being the iconic DC Trinity. Throughout the decades that these characters have been established, they each share a fun dynamic between the three. Batman and Superman have a pretty close and tightly knit friendship, and they each have shown to have a pretty good relationship with Wonder Woman as well. No, not that, get out of here! You get it. Any good trio has each of the individual members have some form of meaningful and interesting dynamic or relationship. And that brings us to our Team Sonic trio, Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and the problem I have with them. Now, is it just me, or is our iconic trio in terms of meaningful and interesting dynamics just a little bit one-sided? What I mean is that when it comes to Team Sonic, each of the members aren't really as well-rounded as you think. The team composed of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles is only really ever shown to establish Sonic with a good dynamic with either Tails and Knuckles, whereas the latter two are never shown to have anything going on with just the two of them. Yes, my problem with Team Sonic is that 2 out of the 3 team members are never shown to have that consistent or good of a dynamic with one another. Sonic and Tails of course have their brotherly bond, and Sonic and Knuckles of course have their playful rivalry, but Tails and Knuckles, they have nothing. I came to this realization when reading IDW a few years back, and in the comics, Knuckles was absent guarding the Master Emerald, and for a period, Sonic, Tails, and Amy were the main focus facing off against Eggman. And I'm not gonna lie, even though this little mashup hasn't been around for that long, I can't help but say I like it more than the original trio. Because Sonic, of course, has a well-established dynamic with each of them respectively, but also, Tails and Amy have shown to have a pretty good rapport with one another throughout the franchise. Now in the games, not so much. But stuff like Sonic X and Sonic Boom show how Tails' childlike wonderment and slight naivete, and Amy's bubbly and energetic personality mix surprisingly well, creating to me a much more satisfying mix of characters compared to whenever Knuckles is around. Now I will say, it's not like Tails and Knucks haven't had any form of cool interactions or anything like that, because there have been a few sprinkled here and there that are interesting, like Knucks teasing Tails after they ran into Shadow in Sonic Heroes, and the little diss he gave him in Sonic Riders was hilarious, as well as just random moments here and there that only really showed the potential of what kind of dynamic they have, but not actually give them one. I'm going to go on a brief tangent, and I hope you all stick with me for this, but do any of y'all remember Clarence? The show that would focus on a boy and his friends as they do wacky random bullshit together? There was an episode where Clarence was invited to a sleepover, and that left Clarence's 2 main friends, Jeff and Sumo, to hang out without him. Throughout the episode, they struggled to really find anything to do without Clarence, but from what I remember, keep in mind, I'm retelling all of this from memory, I'm not 100% sure how things wrapped up. They found common ground until Clarence made his return. I don't know why, but I low-key feel like we kinda need something like that for Tails and Knuckles. Maybe a solo adventure of them doing some cool shit together that would show why they work well together and could just experiment with some cool interactions. Knuckles' social ineptitude combined with Tails' smarts and childish nature, I can think would allow for some fun interactions, if given the opportunity, but unfortunately, they haven't been given much. The few interactions they had in the second movie do give me hope that we'll see more interesting stuff from these two. Movie Knuckles' intensity and Tails' childlike naivete was really fun to see mixed together. Now again, their interactions were minor, but I don't know, I thought they were fun. Since Sonic Lost World and Boom, the franchise has put a bigger light on Team Sonic being a four-man group, adding along Amy to be a more prominent member of the group. And during this specific time when it was really picking up, I was all for it. I like Amy being a more prominent part of the team, but it also reinforces just how meh the original trio kind of is. Because between Sonic and Amy, Tails and Amy, Sonic and Tails, Sonic and Knuckles, hell, even Amy and Knuckles, they each have a fun dynamic except for Tails and Knucks. I feel like now y'all can tell why I wanted to make this video a two-part discussion, because I can't find myself to say anything further without just repeating myself. The Team Sonic trio as we know it has a huge problem, and it's that 2 out of the 3 team members don't have that good of a dynamic. Throughout the franchise, we've seen glimpses of what an expanded version of their bond can be, but that's it. Just glimpses. Throughout the decades these two characters have been established, they don't really have that many noteworthy interactions, resulting in the whole trio being kinda weak to me, and any other variation of Team Sonic to just be vastly superior in my opinion. The only solution I could recommend would just to, like I mentioned before, give us scenarios where Tails and Knucks are on their own adventures and actually give enough of a shit to give them some fun interactions. Either have Knucks unintentionally pick on Tails to contrast Sonic as the slightly rougher older brother, or just something to give these guys something interesting. Now, with the discussion on Team Sonic out of the way, let's bleed over into my next topic. I know I just made a big hullabaloo about Team Sonic, and a lot of what I just said I obviously still wholeheartedly believe in. But there's something that's been on my mind for the past few months that's been bugging me with how this franchise handles its characters. This franchise just loves teams, specifically trios. 3 is the magic fucking number with this series. But my problem with that is that specific obsession with trios and having characters relegated to specific teams just leaves room for very little variety when it comes to our cast. Like, let's use Team Sonic for example, as I just made a big fuss about them in the first half of this video. Team Sonic, as in like a team of characters that come together to save the world or whatever, shouldn't necessarily exist. I'm going to need you guys to stick with me here, because what I mean by that is that the lineup of Sonic, Tails, and Knucks, or even Sonic, Tails, Knucks, and Amy, really shouldn't be treated as a team. I prefer the approach of just making them friends who would occasionally come together depending on the circumstances. Recent media like IDW and some of the past few games have treated these guys like a team that are always coming together to defend the world or something. And I don't know, it just lacks a lot of the charm. One of the reasons I came to this conclusion was during a rewatch of Sonic X. Say what you will about the show itself, I sure as hell have a lot to say about it, but it kind of marked a specific point in time for the Sonic series and how it handled some of its characters. Team Sonic, as we now know it, really wasn't a prominent thing. And X and the rest of the series, for that matter, kind of prioritized itself on just having these characters run into each other through happenstance. Sonic Superstars of all things strangely reinforces my point on this, because in that game, Sonic and Tails were on their own following Fang to the North Star Islands, and Knuckles and Amy, seeing them in the distance, just decided they wanted to tag along. Having the Sonic cast be limited and relegated to specific teams just results in the cast losing a bit of its charm. Another thing that's brought this to my attention is how certain fans respond to characters like Rouge and Amy. As I mentioned before, since Lost World and Sonic Boom, Amy has been more known and associated with Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. But in the years since, I've noticed that certain fans express their frustration with no Team Rose in official content. Team Rose, introduced in Sonic Heroes, showed Amy taking charge and leading a group comprised of herself, Cream the Rabbit, and Big the Cat. Since that game, we haven't really seen this lineup be revisited. There was an opportunity for them to do such in the game Team Sonic Racing, which released a few years back, but instead of using Cream, they opted to use a group of Chow as Team Rose's third member. And all I really have to say on this particular matter is that I just personally don't care if Cream, Amy, and Big aren't brought together that often, because they were never a team to begin with. They were randomly hanging out one day and just decided to go on an adventure that same day. These three don't need to always be lumped together because that's not really their purpose. And another example being Rouge. The discussions and debates surrounding Rouge stood out significantly more to me because I just find them to be so bizarre. Stop me if you've heard this one. Rouge is shown to be working alongside Sonic and Co. completely separate from Shadow and Omega, and Sonic fans erupt in shock and confusion. They're making Rouge a part of Team Sonic? They're really trying to erase Team Dark from the series. Sega is really trying to force Rouge as a new member of Team Sonic? And a whole bunch of bullshit like that. The reason I find this so bizarre is because both of the instances of this happening, being Sonic Prime and Sonic Dream Team, very clearly established that she's working with Sonic and Co. for her own personal goals, which is what she's always been known to do. Yeah, she mainly associates with Shadow and Omega, but she also works alongside anyone who can get her closer to what she wants. I gotta bring it back to Sonic X, because while yes, Team Dark wasn't established, they also showed Rouge working with a variety of characters in order to get what she wants. I don't know why folks are acting like this is some brand new thing. All of this isn't to say that I dislike teams in the Sonic series, because I very obviously do. The entire first half of this video was me going over my problems with the traditional Team Sonic trio, a team I do kind of enjoy. And if you've seen my other videos, you know I love Team Dark. Team Chaotix are probably my second favorite trio next to them, but the way Sega and some fans treat and view some of these teams, I personally think needs to change. Just because these characters are mainly associated with a specific group, doesn't mean we can't explore and have them associate with other characters as well. That's what keeps the franchise and characters interesting in my opinion. To circle back to Team Sonic, Sonic himself isn't even the kind of character that should stay so strictly tied and associated with a specific group. Following Sonic on an adventure and having him team up with whoever, wherever, is significantly more interesting. I say this because I hope Sega takes advantage of what they set up in Sonic Frontiers. With Tails, Amy, and Knuckles being set up to go on their own separate adventures, it gives us the opportunity to have the next mainline game focus on Sonic with a different mix-up of characters. I had been toying around with the idea of having the roster for the next mainline game to be Sonic, Blaze, and Tangle alongside Team Dark. Something like that would be kind of fun in my opinion. I hope y'all are starting to see where I'm coming from. In regards to this issue with teams, etc., I don't say this as someone who outright hates them or anything like that, but I think we should start to tread lightly with how we perceive and handle them going forward. Hell, we just got introduced to a new trio not too long ago in the IDW comics, being the Diamond Cutters, featuring all comic originals, Tangle the Lemur, Whisper the Wolf, and Lanolin the Sheep. They so far haven't been given too much time to do anything noteworthy as a trio, or have that good of a dynamic in my opinion. So I hope they don't fall into the trap of constantly needing to be tied and associated with each other, or being unnecessarily dull and boring. I think that's about all I've got to say on these particular topics, and Hedgehog Month as a whole. I'll admit, I did have a lot more planned for this little thing, but unfortunately with work and everything, I didn't have a lot of time to do everything I wanted. But there is always next year. There are surely more reviews, discussions, and topics for me to cover pertaining to our favorite hedgehog in the near future. So, with all that said, if you agree or disagree with anything I've said in this video, let me know right down there in the comments below. Also be sure to like and subscribe. This is Darion of GNB Productions, and take care.